Hi everyone. We're now on lesson 6 of our chemistry unit of Science 10. This is atoms to ions. And this for me is when the chemistry really starts. We're looking at now essentially why do atoms ever come together? Why do they form bonds? Why would they want to interact with each other? And what we're looking at here is we're trying to understand, we're going from what's an atom, which we have thoroughly covered so far, and how and why do they become what's called ions? Specifically, there's two types of ions. They are cations and anions. We're also going to be looking at valence electrons and the 288 rule. Now, I want to be clear. When you watch this video, this has 6 slides to it. This is very brief. But when you look down in your workspace, there's a much more thorough video that I've done up for you. So I want to be clear. In this first video, I'm going to go more quickly, just go over the terminology, the concepts. But the next video is one where I really go into, well, the most important stuff, how atoms turn into ions. And I draw out electrons moving here and there, how the 288 rule works. And you need to watch this video to kind of get an introduction to the topic. And the next video, this is the key, this one right here, the next video in this section of the workspace. Please have your periodic table in front of you when we do this. So again, before I start, remember, this video is more like theoretical. I'm introducing you to the topic. The next video, which is in this workspace, is where I really get into the how and the why, okay? So, atoms to ions, ion formation. Under some circumstances, atoms of most elements will either gain or lose one of their outermost electrons. So if you remember, when we look at the model of an atom, remember we have a nucleus, and that's the nucleus there. And then you might remember that we have electrons that kind of go around on the outside, and we have 3 levels. And what I'm saying to you here is we're talking about, it says it is the process, will either gain or lose one of their outermost electrons. So I don't want to get into this too much because that's the next video, but what we're talking about is electrons that might exist in this outer level, and it would go all the way around. Sometimes we're either going to lose some in that level or gain some in that level. The process of gaining or losing electrons is called ionization. Very, very important. Ionization results in the formation of an ion. So let's be really, really clear. What we've been looking at so far is an atom. Okay? So if you, let's say, take sodium. Now if you look and you find the atomic number for sodium, that is 11. What does that 11 mean? Well, we know that we have 11 protons. And remember, protons are positive charges. But what you might also remember is an atom has no charge. An atom has no charge. Well, what does that mean? An electron is neutral. So that doesn't really help us out. So if I'm telling you sodium must have no charge, how many electrons does it have to have? Well, if it's in atom form, it must have 11 electrons. And why is that? Because electrons are negative. And you see in this case, if you have 11 positives and 11 negatives, they balance out to an overall charge of 0. And that's why atoms have no charge. If I looked at, let's say, chlorine, typically, an atom of chlorine has 17 protons. That's the atomic number. And that means 17 positive charges. Therefore, that also means it has 17 electrons. And that would mean you have 17 negative charges. You see, those 17 protons and 17 electrons are going to balance out and give an atom a charge of 0. Very, very clear here, everyone. Please make sure you know an atom has no charge. It has an equal number of protons and electrons. What we're talking about now in this lesson is ion formation, and that is because right here, the atom is now either losing or gaining electrons. And you have to think, remember, an electron is a negative charge. So we're going to move now from an atom that has no charge to an ion that does have a charge. An ion is an electrically charged atom or group of atoms. Ionization results in metals and nonmetals forming compounds. Again, a lot of this is coming up. Believe me, in that second video, you're going to see me draw this out for you a million times. So I'm trying to give you a very basic introduction, and believe me, the information is all coming. Just to look at the diagrams here, if you look at aluminum, you can just see here, here's an aluminum atom. And what I can tell you is, let's just count. So there's 13. Can you see? I'm going to change my color. I'll go to blue. Can you see right there where it says 13 plus? So that must mean we have 13 protons. Okay. And now let's count around the outside. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 electrons. So that means we have 13 negative electrons. So is that a perfect balance? You bet it is. 13 positives and 13 negatives cancel out. So that means we have an aluminum atom. Why is that? Because 13 positives and 13 negatives cancels out. We have an overall charge of 0. That's why it's an atom. But look at what's happened. I don't expect you to understand this yet, because that's going to be explained big time in the next video. But for some reason, this aluminum atom is going to give away or lose 3 electrons. What's interesting there, if you notice, we still have, if I just erase this here now. So if you look, we've lost 3 electrons, and believe me, the next video will tell you why. If you look now, we still have 13 protons, so that hasn't changed. So that means we have a charge of 13 positive. Now if we lose 3 electrons, how many electrons do we have now? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Now we have 10 electrons. You see, this is no longer an atom. Why is that? Because we don't have the same number of protons and electrons. This is charged now. You see, we have 3 more positives than we do negatives. This has a charge of 3 plus now. Like I said to you, I'm going to explain to you why that happens, but what I want you to know, why is that an ion? It is an ion because we no longer have the same number of protons and electrons, which means we no longer have a charge of 0. If you look here at the bottom at chlorine, okay, it has, here's our atom, we have 17 protons. And if you go through and count those little dots around, that means you're going to have 17 electrons. The 17 protons, that means you have 17 positives, means you have 17 negatives. They are going to cancel each other out, gives you a charge of 0. That's why it's a chlorine atom. Now it looks like here, this time the chlorine is going to gain an atom. Again, I will tell you why in that video I want you to watch. That's in this section as well. But it's interesting, if you look over here, now we have 17 protons, which means a charge of 17 positive. If we gain an electron, now we have 18 electrons. Well, that now means we have 17 positive charges and we have 18 negative charges. That's no longer a balance, everyone. It seems to me we have 1 more negative than we do positives. That's a charge of -1. Again, I'll explain why, but the point is, do you see the difference? In an atom, you have the same number of protons and electrons. In an ion, you have a different number of protons and electrons, and that's key to understand. Okay, what we're going to look at next here, again, this is just the terms I want you to know. When you have a positive charge, that is called a cation. In other words, if you have an ion and it overall has a positive charge at the end, it is called a cation. Okay? And you will understand why this happens. So cations are positively charged ions. Here's something you can make a note of. Metals, they form positive ions or cations. Why is that? It's because they always lose electrons. Now, here's what I want you to know. Let's take a look right here. If you look, this is sodium. It has 11 protons and 11 electrons. That gives you a charge of 0. So this must be your atom. If you look at the next, to the right, the number of protons never changes, you see. But now, for whatever reason, we're down to 10 electrons. Again, the reason I will explain to you in that video below. But the point is, we have 11 positives and we have 10 negatives. So what do we have one more of? Well, we have a charge of 1 positive. We are 1 in the positive direction. So we know this is an ion because it's no longer a balance. Specifically, this is a cation because it's a positive ion. And what you want to know here is metals. It is metals that form cations. Why? Well, if you look at our example right here, what's going to, see, look at this. We were at 11 electrons, and then we shifted to having 10 electrons. You don't understand why yet, but you can tell we certainly have lost one. So here's the deal, everyone. Here's what I want you to know. Metals lose electrons, and they form positive ions, which are cations. I will explain that to you, but that's what I want you to know. If you lose an electron, you become a positive ion. Okay, let's move forward. Anions, on the other side, are when you have an ion that has a negative charge. Okay, and that's going to give you we call that an anion specifically. So anions are negatively charged ions. This is interesting. Anions typically start with nonmetals, and they gain electrons. So it's interesting here, if you take, this is fluorine. Let's look right here. Here's our atom. As you can see, we have 9 positives and 9 negatives. That is an overall charge of 0. Life is good. Now, what I'm going to tell you, and you just take my word for it until the next video, for whatever reason, the fluorine has taken 1 more electron. You see that? The protons didn't change, but we did gain 1 more electron. So if you look at that, what do we have 1 more of? We have 1 extra electron. Electrons are negative, so we have an overall charge of -1. That gives us an ion, but specifically it's an anion. So here's the goal, everyone. If you gain an electron, like in this case, we went from 9 electrons to 10 electrons. That means we gained 1. That is an anion. And what you'll notice, just keep this in mind moving forward, it is non-metals that gain electrons. I'll say that again. Non-metals are what gain electrons. Very, very important, and you will understand why soon. Okay, so ion formation. Most ion formation takes place when metals and non-metals form ionic compounds. Well, this is kind of interesting. Okay, so I don't want to get too far ahead because this is better explained in the next video, but I just want to make sure that you understand this. You see, what's going to happen here very, very soon is we're going to take let's say a metal, okay, and we are going to put it, we're going to add it, let's say, or put it next to a non-metal. Now, if you keep track here of what I've been talking about, what do metals always do? It seems to me that metals want to give away or lose an electron. But if you also follow what I'm saying, non-metals seem to want to always take them. So you see, it's actually it's a perfect match. Metals, they want to lose electrons, and non-metals want to take electrons. So if you were to pair a metal and a non-metal together, that's a pretty good match. Okay, that's pretty good. So I just want you to keep that kind of in the back of your mind right now. Think of that. Metals always want to lose. Non-metals always want to gain. And it's interesting, that's a perfect match. If you put a metal and a non-metal together, that should work out perfectly. And again, I'll show you that in the video that's upcoming. Okay, so I've mentioned this now many times. Atoms to ions, it's a 288 rule or octet rule. And believe me, that video I keep referring to, you will see it. Using the 288 rule, you will understand why metals lose electrons and become positive. Using this rule, you'll understand why non-metals gain electrons. And also you'll understand how this gives you the charges on your table. Now it's interesting, if you look there on your periodic table, you'll see if you find sodium, that's the atomic number 11, it has a charge of positive 1. I'm going to help you understand why those charges are there. If you look at magnesium, it has a charge of positive 2. If you look over at chlorine, it'll have a charge of -1. The point is, this is all going to be put together. We are moving from atoms to ions. We know that metals want to lose electrons. We know that non-metals want to take. And this is all going around this 288 rule and why it's happening. So I've kind of given you a basis understanding, but if you watch the next video, that's where I really get into it. Okay, this is a crucial lesson. Please, please, please watch the next video.